Hello and welcome to Bulimia Sucks. I'm your host, Kate Hudson Hall, and thank you so much for listening. So this is a platform for people to share relatable and uplifting and inspiring conversations based on bulimia and anorexia and then other eating disorders. And episodes include their personal stories of where they are now and their difficult journeys and their steps taken into their recovery. And then, of course, also, as you may know, to professionals who work with people with an eating disorder. Now, my book, Bulimia Sucks, the audio book, is now live on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes. Yay! And if you would be interested and would like a free copy of this, please email me at katehudsonhall@gmail.com and I can send you the code so you can download it for free. And the other thing that I've been working on is making coloring books. Oh, I'm very excited about this. I've been making coloring books and they have quotes in them, fabulous quotes, and also on the opposite page, there's a question about each quote, about what you can learn from that quote specifically for yourself, and with guidance to help to maybe take you forward in your recovery. So we've got a Bulimia Sucks coloring book, and then there's also an Anorexia Sucks and also a Binge Eating Sucks book. So those three are the eating disorders group of books. And then also I've made one for anxiety because I know that many of us have difficulty with anxiety. So that is called Anxiety Relief. So coloring book. So if you go and put my name into Amazon, you'll be able to, they'll all come up there. So you'll be able to find them all there if you're interested in having a look further into those. So good. So now my guest today, yes, it's very exciting, is Tricia Nelson. So Tricia is an internationally acclaimed author of Heal Your Hunger, and she is a transformational speaker and an emotional eating expert. She has been featured on dozens of radio and television networks and has successfully helped hundreds of people overcome a variety of eating disorders and addictions. So born and raised in Massachusetts, Tricia's own struggles began in her early childhood, where she attempted to cope with life's stresses and emotional pain by overeating and then other destructive behaviors. Continuing into adolescence, she began binge drinking and eventually gained more than 50 pounds. So Tricia's here today to tell us of her journey with her difficult time. So welcome, Tricia. This is fabulous to have you join us.
Thanks, Kate, for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
Yay. Yay. So great. So Tricia, so tell us about from the beginning, wherever you want to begin, about your journey with your eating disorder and then the binge drinking and the difficulties.
Sure. Yeah. So I started, I think way back when, as far back as I can remember, I was an emotional eater. Of course, I didn't call it that. I thought I just liked food. So I was super obsessed with food. I loved to eat and cook and, go out to dinner. And it was just a big highlight for me. And it would have been fine, but I gained weight really easily. So by age 21, I was 50 pounds overweight. And I hated my fat. I used to have a roll in my tummy. I would scrunch up in my hands and imagine cutting off, like you cut fat off the side of a steak. And I thought about getting some disease where I'd automatically lose weight without having to diet. Or I even considered joining the army where I'd be forced to exercise at boot camp because I hated to exercise. So, it was some pretty,
difficult.
It was crazy. I just had all these, thoughts because of course I dieted, I did diets, but I was a binge eater, and definitely a binge eating disorder. And, I could last only for a short period of time on diets. And then I just break out. Which
is how most people are, aren't they? Because you're
Yeah,
great for the first like 2-3 days. And then it's like, oh, I give up.
yeah. Yep, exactly. And I would try to starve myself here and there, or go on exercise, binges, kind of trying to make up for my binges through exercising, jogging, and that kind of thing. But, ultimately I just ended up eating. And I actually was not able to be bulimic. I tried to vomit, and I couldn't. I put my finger down my throat. I couldn't ever do it, which I know now I'm very grateful for.
Absolutely.
But definitely, with the amounts of food that I ate, I definitely wanted that to be an option for me, because I'd pack on pounds, and I got very overweight, and it just brought me a lot of unhappiness. I was obsessed with my weight. I felt bigger than my friends. I was not popular with boys. I felt very ugly. I felt ashamed of my lack of control. I had the secret life, of eating. Most of my binges were at night, in front of the television. And there was something very satisfying about binging. So I would get literally binge foods together, like cookies and ice cream and chips. You have to have salty with your sweet, of course. So, I'd get it all together, and I'd sit in front of the TV, and I'd gorge myself. And I did a lot of embarrassing things. Like, I would get so full that I would feel totally disgusted. And I would be like I'd be so full from eating certain foods that I would have purchased. And I think, I'm never eating that again. Like, that's disgusting. Like, the amount that I ate made me hate the food, right? It was the food's fault. So I'm like, I'm never eating that again. And so I sweep up all the remains and throw them in the trash, because I can't eat anymore. And then I'd pass out on the couch, in my sugar coma. But a couple of hours later, I'd wake up, and I would have digested a little bit of food. So I had a little bit of space in my tummy. And then I'd remember the cookies that I'd thrown out, and I'd go back to the trash, and I'd get them out of the trash. Right. And so I did that, and I felt like, oh my God, I am the grossest person in the world. Like, I thought I was the only one who does this. Turns out I ended up doing a garbage eating reenactment on YouTube, like many years ago, like 10 years ago. And I had over 60,000 hits. Yes. And people saying like, oh my God, I've done this or whatever. Clearly I was not the only one doing this, and I've had so many stories. Like, some people say, oh yeah, I used to pour dishwashing soap on the foods to just make sure I wouldn't go get it in the trash, and coffee grinds and that kind of thing. So obviously I was not the only one, but when you do these crazy things with food,
but you think that you are the only one.
Exactly. You think you're the only one, and that just makes you feel worse. It makes you feel more isolated, like such a pariah. Yes.
Angry. Oh yeah.
So much so. And that just exacerbates the eating. It's like, then you eat more, and isolate yourself more and feel even worse. So that's really how it went for me. And because I tried so many diets, I was a yo-yo-yer. Like, I'd be up 30, down 20, up 10, and I was on this roller coaster ride all the time with my weight. And I had about 5 different sizes of pants in my closet, because I never knew what size I'd be. Right. And, at some point, Kate, I got so discouraged, and I just felt like, oh my God, like nothing I try will work with, like nothing I've tried will work. I'm hopeless. I just felt like a hopeless case. And what happened, thankfully, is I met somebody who had a different way of approaching the problem and wasn't giving me another diet to follow, or exercise plan, and I was in therapy also. I mean, I did lots of things. I went to an eating disorders therapist twice a week for a year. So I was like really looking for answers. I went to 12-step programs. I did a lot of things, but that's why I felt so hopeless, because I did so many things. I read so many books.
And nothing was, I presume nothing was helping.
No, it really wasn't. I mean, again, for a period of time, I'd be good. And then I'd just break out and go back to my old ways of eating. So what happened was I met somebody who was more of a spiritual mentor. This person had been obese, lost the weight, and was able to help me really go deeper and deal with the underlying causes, of my emotional eating. And so that turned everything around for me. And I was so fortunate. I was in my early 20s, and I was blessed to be able to heal. And, I've essentially been in a thin body ever since, but pretty effortlessly, where I don't have to control food and I don't have to weigh and measure food or do crazy things with food or exercise. You know, my main, I'm not a hard exerciser. I'm kind of wimpy. So I can't really make myself do really hard exercise. So, you know, I walk, you know.
So Tricia, can I just
Yeah.
ask you, so with regards to, so you said you spend time 2 days a week with an eating disorders therapist.
Yeah.
So what was the difference between that specific therapist and the one that really you felt was the key to your turnaround?
Yeah, great question. My eating disorders therapist, she had my name, her name was Tricia, and she was great. I mean, I'm very grateful for her because she kind of held me while I was fine, you know, kind of trying to figure things out. But ultimately, I don't think it was what I needed, in that it was only an hour each time, you know, which obviously you don't go hang out in your therapist's office for 5 hours, but you know, it was an hour at a time. And I was in my head. I was in my head talking about things from my head, you know, and I had sexual abuse in my past. And at some point that came up and I talked about that, but I was always kind of in my head, and all the pain was locked away in my heart. So to me, that's the difference, is that I couldn't get out of my head. And again, it's not the therapist's fault. It's just, I don't think the environment was right for me, in that, I show up, I talk, and then you have to pack it all in and leave. And I think I just didn't have enough feeling of safety to let it all hang out.
Okay.
And
so that's quite a key then. So when somebody is looking for a therapist, is to find that true underlying conscious, unconscious feeling of safety with that therapist.
I think it's just absolutely vital, you know, and again, it was nothing against her. She was very loving. But I think that I don't know. So it was just the stiffness of sitting in an office, you know, and sitting there and being polite and that kind of thing. Yeah. I had so much inside of me that I was afraid to unpack. You know, I felt like if I even scratched the surface of the pain inside of me, like it would just all come falling out and I'd be locked up. Like, I just felt like there was so much in me that it's like I couldn't even begin to unpack it.
Yeah.
You know? And so this other person who helped me was not a therapist, was just somebody who had had the problem and had overcome it, which I think is really essential too, or at least super helpful, you know, to talk to somebody who's been in your shoes, who has had this kind of eating problem, and he had overcome it himself. There was a transmission, like there was a safety from that, you know, feeling of somebody having been exactly where I had been. Because I think with addicts, especially, I consider myself a food addict. I think with addicts, we have so much, it's so hard, and we're so isolated, and we're so inside our heads that oftentimes we'll look at somebody, and this is what I did at least, and I'd think like, or I'd look at some skinny doctor or whatever, and I'd be like, how would you know how I feel? Like, have you dug trash, you know, food out of the trash? And I tend to sort of feel like they don't know, they can't possibly understand me. So to talk to somebody who has dug food out of the trash, or has done crazy things, has had their legs chafed from, you know, being overweight, or felt, you know, gone on these crazy binges, whatever, there's a connection. And I think that connection creates that safety. So that definitely played a big part. And this person spent a lot of time with me. I somehow I felt safe enough to let my heart open and let that pain come tumbling out, which was essential. Like, I couldn't just talk about my problems from my head. I had to like let the pain of those problems come out, the pain of my family. I was so afraid to address the pain I had from my childhood. You know, I had a good childhood. I had really loving parents. They hugged me. They weren't like, you know, they weren't bad parents. They were good parents, but they, you know, none of us in my family had all four tires on the pavement. Okay. So we all had our issues. And so, but because it wasn't a bad childhood, I mean, there are no plates flying or windows smashing, I somehow didn't feel worthy of going there, of talking about the pain I had in my childhood.
Right.
And right. Like I just didn't give myself permission. And so that was really important that I'm like, we all have pain, all God's children got problems, so it's
Absolutely.
like, if you have it, you got to deal with it. And you don't compare yourself to other people's problems. You just, whatever you got, it's yours, and you got to process it. You got to get rid of it,
So Tricia, how did you, so you got to that point where you felt, right, okay, I feel safe enough and I'm ready to unlock the key to my heart and talk about my past.
Yeah.
And how else did you know that you were ready?
Well, I didn't know. This all kind of happened organically. I mean, I just was in so much pain from all the things I've tried that failed. It just was sort of it was just sort of a set of circumstances that kind of just flowed and happened. So I didn't consciously know I was ready. It just apparently was, but I think, there's definitely an organic benefit of hitting bottom, so to speak. Again, anybody with an addiction, they talk about hitting bottom in AA or with alcoholics, drug addicts, and that kind of thing. And I think it's true for eating disorders as well. Like when you get to that place where you're sick and tired of being sick and tired, and that happened, my sick and tired happened when I lost weight. I had lost about 40 pounds. I was kind of close to my goal weight, or maybe I was at my goal weight at the time, but I was crazy. Like I had lost the weight and I was about to go back up the scale again because I was so uncomfortable in a thinner body. And so, so I was uncomfortable in a thinner body. Why? Because I had all these feelings coming up. Like the problem with diets is, or food plans is you go on a food plan, it takes away all your, ooey gooey, yummy, chewy foods. And then, which are the things I use to cope with my life, to stuff my feelings. You take all those foods away, all you have is feelings.
And all this bubbling comes to the surface.
Yeah.
Like, oh my gosh. So yes. And plus you didn't know how to, I suppose, live in your body at that slimmer weight.
It's true. And,
it's just totally uncomfortable, I suppose.
Absolutely. And I think there's a big reason why people put weight back on is because they're not prepared for a thin body. Like if you have a thinner body than you're used to, and I know many people listening might not have had the experience of being obese, but whatever weight you gain, if you lose it, all you have is more feelings to cope with. Like you've got a bigger container for feelings, because the food and the weight, it kept my feelings at bay. Here are the three things I often.
That's what it does. That's what the food does. It suppresses
100%. It serves as, I call it the PEP test, emotional eating. It's like, these are the ways that food was serving me. It served as a painkiller. PEP is an acronym. So the first P is painkiller. So it kills the pain.
Yeah.
The E stands for escape. It takes me far away from my reality. And the last P is punishment. It makes me like hurt myself and hate myself. So the painkiller, the escape, and the punishment, that's what the food was doing for me. And oftentimes all at once, it did all three. Of course you kill your pain, but then you have more pain because you're hurting for what you've done to your body, so absolutely. So when I lost the weight, that's when I got most miserable, and it's like any person who wants to have that perfect body, if you get it, watch out. Cause then you're like, oh my God, like I'm not as happy as I imagined I would be. Because all I have is more feelings.
Absolutely. And all these raw feelings and different experiences will be bubbling up to the surface. And there's a lot to work through.
Totally. So that was my bottom. That was my bottom.
So then at that point, were you still spending time with your friend and then he was helping you through?
That's when I sought that help. I sought the help when I lost the weight. I was in therapy, but I lost the weight. You're kind of on a high when you lose weight. It's like, you look fabulous. People are commenting. I was so obsessed with myself that I was wearing like 3 different outfits in a day. Like I couldn't get enough, because I was fitting in clothes that I hadn't fit in before. So I was like really into it. So I was wearing these different outfits, but I was I was trying to fill myself up. Like I didn't have the food anymore. And I was using other obsessions to fill myself up with
Right.
boys. I was dating, I was in and out of relationships. So I was reaching for other replacement addictions, because I wasn't really building a strong foundation within myself. I was just swapping it, I call it switching deck chairs on the Titanic,
Yeah, absolutely. You've got to find a way to deal with your feelings. So it's reaching out for something else, unless you are going to actually address them.
Yeah. And that's really when I hit my bottom and I'm like, there's got to be a better way because this isn't working for me. I mean, I had dyed my hair purple. I had this lock of purple hair. Like I was just reaching for anything to give me a fix, but it's because I had all these feelings coming up that I just had no tools to deal with. So that's what I did is I learned new tools to really address my feelings, be with myself, create, some peace within. So I didn't have to be like just switching addictions. And that was my path. My path was to learn ways of really self-soothing and lowering my stress and showing up differently in the world where I wasn't creating stress. Cause what was happening between my ears is I was creating a lot of stress in my life, just based on how I thought about people, about myself, about the world, all my insecurities. I was creating a lot of stress that I would then stress eat over. So it's like I had to find a whole new way of living. And I often tell my clients, you don't have an eating problem, which, ostensibly you have a living problem. Like it's really a living problem that manifests as an eating problem. So it's the living problem that I had to really heal.
Yeah. Yeah. And how did you, so addressing all of these different areas, addressing how you were thinking, from that time, what do you remember really helped you?
Oh my gosh, so many things. One is I learned how to meditate. Okay. So I had to learn how to meditate. That's been such an essential part of my journey. So many, many years ago, I learned to meditate kind of like a transcendental meditation. So twice a day for 20 minutes. Mm-hmm. I've done that pretty religiously for over 30 years now. And yeah, it's incredible. So transforming, but I needed it because my head was so busy. And oftentimes, my clients will say, oh, I can't meditate. My head's too busy. Well, that's kind of the freaking point. Like that's why we correctly. Do it. Yeah. Like people think their heads are going to be quiet. That's not meditation. Meditation is you're sort of letting all the thoughts of the day kind of bubble up and you don't worry about it. Like you just sort of sit and be quiet anyway, which is not an easy thing for somebody with an eating disorder. I understand. Yeah. To sit and be quiet, but it's a great practice.
Yeah. I teach, Tricia, I teach mindfulness. So that is obviously incorporates meditation. And the way that I like to explain it's like pressing the pause button of that racing mind and just giving yourself a break, even if it's only for 2 minutes, 3 minutes, whatever it may be. But if you could just press stop that noise in your head and that chitter chatter just for a few moments, imagine how you could feel so much calmer after that.
Yeah. And also just giving your body a rest too is so just finding relaxation in your body when we're so, we carry so much stress in our body too. So that's so, so helpful. So that
was really helpful.
Oh, amazing. Life changing, and there's still some days where I don't want to meditate and I check my clock. I'm like, are we done yet? So people think like I'm some Zen master. I'm not, I sit down and I be quiet twice a day and it settles me down. And it also gives me energy. So in the afternoon, I find that emotional eaters have the hardest time with food in the late afternoon into the evening, and nighttime eating, because that's when we don't have as many distractions in the day. That's when we've built up some stress and some feelings, and so when we have that afternoon slump, instead of reaching for chocolate or coffee or something, I meditate. And that afternoon meditation is so powerful because it gives me a recharge, and then I can get through the rest of my day without having, to eat something or pick at food or whatever. So meditation is huge. Offloading stressful feelings through writing, super important.
Journaling, yes.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Getting those feelings out.
Totally. So important. Also community, being in community with other emotional eaters. I find that it's virtually impossible to really heal from an eating disorder on your own in a vacuum. Like there's so much healing benefit to being in community with others who suffer from the same problem and have a common solution. So that's super, super powerful. And I do all my work through groups because of it. Having a morning routine, like a morning, again, meditation, prayer, spiritual reading, doing something, I call it putting money in your spiritual bank account. So if you make deposits early in the morning, instead of jumping on your phone, email, reacting to stress, taking some time, even if you have to get up early before the kids get up or whatever, taking time for yourself and having that time to get centered and grounded, and also fed. Like we have to be nourished at a deeper level because it's not food we're really hungry for. It's a deeper hunger. So feeding ourselves, putting money in our spiritual bank account so we can take withdrawals later when things get stressful and chaotic. We have to have those deposits made early in the morning so we can take withdrawals later. Otherwise we're on empty, there's nothing in the account and we're reaching for snacky foods. So that's super, super important as well, because we, as I said, we're hungry at a deeper level. So we have to nourish ourselves at a deeper level as well.
Yeah, absolutely. When I work with my clients that weight loss clients, one question I always ask them is, so when you are in a situation and you're aware, awareness is the first step, isn't it? It's ask yourself, I know I'm not hungry for this food. What feelings am I trying to change?
Yes. Great. That's so true. Because it's always something, right? Like, like something we're trying to avoid or distract from. Yeah.
So amazing. Look at you now. So this is 20 years later.
Yeah, actually 30 years later. I'm kind of old. But I started young, so I'm grateful. Yeah, it's been my whole adult life. I've been doing this work for a very long time.
Wow.
It's my passion. And I like the emotional eating. I use the words emotional eating for any kind of disordered eating because I find that it's emotionally driven, like whatever our particular, manifestation of an eating disorder, it's from the emotion. So I like the umbrella term of emotional eating because it doesn't necessarily mean overeating. It can be emotionally under eating or restricting as well, Yeah,
absolutely. Absolutely. Because it's all to do with feelings.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh my gosh. And so you've written a book. So tell us, Tricia, tell us about your book.
So the book is called Heal Your Hunger, 7 Simple Steps to End Emotional Eating Now. It's on Amazon and other places as well. And it really lays out my process for healing, what I did, what I teach others to do. It's got some great cartoons, but it is, congratulations on your Audible book. I recorded during the pandemic, I recorded my book on Audible. So it is available on Audible as well.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, excellent. Oh, fantastic. And so, well, if people were interested to come along and find more out about your courses, so can you just tell us briefly, so what that involves and how they find you?
Sure. I always recommend people start with my quiz, which is on my website. It's an emotional eating quiz to find out if you're an emotional eater or a food addict or somewhere in between. So it's a free quiz, takes like a minute or two to take. It's on my website. My website is healyourhunger.com, HEAL, heal.
So the same name as your book.
Exactly. So you can take that free quiz. That'll tell you where you are on the emotional eating spectrum, because I feel like we're all somewhere on that spectrum. It's just a matter of where we end up. So you can get a personalized score. That's a great first step. I do have programs, and people can find on my website an opportunity to speak with one of my coaches to kind of talk about their particular, whatever it is they're struggling with, and see if one of my programs would be a fit for them. It's called a breakthrough session. And also I have a podcast called the Heal Your Hunger Show. And so that's a great way for people to
people could find out more. And is that on your website, Tricia?
Yes. Yeah. It's all there.
Oh, yes. Marvelous. So excellent. I'm so pleased that you could join us. It sounds fascinating. I think we all need to go and get your book.
Yeah, well, it's a great way to start, and it explains a lot, I think, about emotional eating and the underlying causes. I have something called the anatomy of the emotional eater, which is 24 personality traits that I find most common among emotional eaters. And so that really speaks to people. They really feel like I read their mail when they read that. So that's all outlined in the book as well.
Yeah. Oh, excellent. Well, Tricia, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
This has been so insightful for so many people. It really will help. And
well,
then people
thank you.
Can come and find you and see how you could help them.
Well, thanks for your, hosting me and for the wonderful work you're doing to help people heal.
Oh, thank you, Tricia. So great. So that's all for today's episode of Bulimia Sucks. So thank you for listening, and join us again on the next episode. And make sure you subscribe to the podcast on Apple iTunes so you never miss an episode. And as I mentioned earlier, check out my book, Bulimia Sucks, on Amazon to learn many different techniques to help you to begin to break through your painful bulimic behaviors and work with those difficult feelings. Oh dear. So thank you for listening, and I look forward to chatting with you in the next episode.